Permaculture gets you into using your brain to think about how to recreate the physical reality around you and make that reality provide some of your primary needs. Now, that could be fruit, nuts, vegetables, firewood, water, meat, eggs, meditation space, raw materials for arts and crafts, and anything else you need to express yourself as a fully functioning human being. And you don't need acres of land to do it. Remember, it's not about autonomy, it's about rewiring your mind and breaking through that ceiling. Although if you do want to go all the way and become a permaculture farmer, that would be great because we're going to need quite a lot of you. Manifesting these thoughts into the physical plane does involve some work. There is no such thing as a free lunch, but this is quite easy work and it will help keep you healthy, as will the food that you start to grow. It is also very positive work because you are finally working with nature instead of paying other people to destroy it for you. In this way, we gain access bit by bit to the wealth that was all around us. After food, you could look at your energy requirements, change over to a rocket mass heater. Google that, rocket mass heater. It's surprisingly easy and incredibly efficient. Or you could build a dry toilet and a grey water reed filter, recycle your water several times over, and stop paying sewage bills. Every time you knock off another expense from your household budget, that's your economy, you gain a little freedom and eventually time. Now, as you grow food and become interested in self-resourcing, you will start to meet other people of a like mind. The law of attraction and a few gentle shovings by that cranky old aunt will sort all that out. You just have to keep your senses open. Now, if you do find that after the 3 years slow gardening that I've prescribed for you on the webpage, that you actually hate gardening, that is absolutely fine. If you decide to give up before having a go, however, I'd kindly ask you to go and starve on Mars. The simple fact of having gone through the exercise and having a go will change your outlook and your social circle, and this will at least get you into contact with good local organic producers, and you can then at least change a few of your shopping choices, and demand creates supply and the world starts to change around you. Also, as you start eating real food made by real people, your brain cells can properly constitute themselves at last because the in-pipe is receiving good stuff. And once this little snowball starts, you can actually begin to work out who you really are. And if the person isn't a gardener, get to work seriously on being the person that you want to be and not the one that the fictive economic pressures made you be. Now, by doing all of this for you, you will also have vastly reduced the amount you are feeding the them, which is, don't forget, the main objective. Now, for the accomplished conspiracy theorist, holistic thinking and permaculture design should come as second nature. This is why I have written all this dynamic drivel. There is a very large niche population out there, and I definitely want to influence you. At the end of any Free Your Mind conference, there are always people who raise their hand and ask, what can we do? And no one wants to give them a nuts and bolts answer, and I do understand why, but fuck it, I'll do it, because quite simply, on a physical level, you need food, water and shelter, and as a species on the planet, we've got all of that wrong. So if we could at least get those three right, then we get air right as well, and things should be all downhill from there on in. Now, as conspiracy theorists, the big problem is that we are very often turned towards the negative, and very often by the very same alternative media personalities that we supposedly think are inspiring us out of the darkness. You see, I do agree with David Icke that we do need to have a look at the dark to understand our enemy. He is completely right. However, I wouldn't accuse David of being completely negative. I would say that he could up the voltage on the positive side quite a bit, especially when he's doing those awful political commentary videos where he is nothing like the fantastic man we see on stage at Wembley. I would like to add in David's defence that it is probably the subject matter dragging him down. Max Igan manages to do the same from time to time. You see, if you talk continually about the dark mechanisms of the enemy, the energy you emit will ultimately drag you over to the dark and you become a dark mechanism of the enemy. We can't all be Illuminati spies or on the CIA payroll now, can we? Now, there is this other phenomenon attached to this, which we call the fluctuation from positive to negative, and it is quite normal. Angels and vampires are essentially of the same species. It's just their outlook on life, immortality, that is slightly different. You could look at it like a 12-volt water pump. Correctly wired to the battery, the pump sends the water one way, the way we want it to, and incorrectly wired, it does exactly the opposite and floods the front room. We find this principle reflected in one of the 7 natural laws. It is the polarity or the pendulum effect. On any given level of yourself, you can swing from one end of the scale to the other with more or less equal effect. A moderately good person can only be moderately bad. An exceedingly good performer like David Icke or Max Igan, who has worked hard to expand their capacity to do very good things, runs the risk of being able to do really bad ones too if they slip and fall over. This means that when David Icke insists on making a weekly video for his fans and he hasn't got anything new to say, well, the potential for extreme good becomes extreme bad, and we find him still licking his wounds from Terry Wogan in public. Again. So, back to positive holistics. A conspiracy theorist already knows how to connect the dots. That is what we are all so passionate about. However, there is this developing danger that we can start finding dots that aren't actually there, or that aren't immediately useful, like the flat earth story, or the Mandela effect, and that CERN particle accelerator rip in space-time scare story. These are interesting arguments and testimonies, but like all the other stuff on the telly, they are just adrenaline-filled stories, and they aren't going to inspire us out of the dictatorship and give us the freedom to go on to fully investigate. Now, following the logic of the nature of reality, I would like to say that the Earth probably was flat when everybody believed it was flat, and risks once again to become flat as we succumb as a species to the two-dimensional reality of mental and physical only. But even good solid conspiracy theorist favourites like the Sumerian tablets, the Anunnaki, and the so-called Depopulation Agenda 21 are only relevant as background information. What really worries me is all the nuts and bolts stuff that we are succumbing to every day. The micro level is ultimately reflected in the macro level in a fractal universe, so let's start dealing with the stuff that is literally in our faces or in our stomachs. GMO food makes you sterile and stupid, or both, and fluoride in the water, of course, is calcifying our pineal glands, and so we are losing our instincts and our capacities to connect with the invisible and nature. And Wi-Fi can apparently control your brain and make you go and murder your neighbours in the night, and chemtrails are poisoning us from the sky and are going to sterilise all our seeds, except, of course, the GMO patented ones from Monsanto. Now, these are the issues that we can deal with right now. It's all there, and it's all very real, but it mustn't become a reason for lack of action. The sheer overwhelming quantity of information is actually paralysing, so let me put it as plainly as I can. If the water is so full of fluoride that your brain cannot work out that you need to stop drinking the fucking stuff, we are definitely in the shit all the way up to our third eyeballs. Access to the negative does come very easily as well. There aren't many purely positive alternative media speakers out there. I am definitely not one. If the devil was as protective of his plans as internet providers are of Wi-Fi access, we would at least need codes longer than bank details to be able to predict the demonic agenda. And unfortunately, this is not the case. The dark agenda is written up all over every dimension for all to see, past, present and future. Personally, I seem to have unlimited access to the stuff. I can invent black futures at the drop of a hat with all the dots joined and in place. Listen, I'll pull a demonic plot out of the hat just for fun. Monsanto and friends are killing off all the bees so that they can release their nanobees into the world, and then the nanobees will only be found to pollinate GMO pollinated patented seeds from patented seed producers, and of course don't forget that the nanobees will only pollinate land where the owner has paid the bee tax, etc, etc. You see, negative invention is really easy. Based on those 2 lines as a plot synopsis, I could write out a whole novel that, if I made it shitty enough, would end up getting made into a Hollywood film, and people like David Icke would be able to call me an insider. I can do demonic development all day long. I'm actually better at it than the bungling, incompetent bunch of bunglers running the world. As David Icke says, you only need to be able to understand the agenda to predict the future. All I can say is that it's lucky for all of you that I'm not in charge of the Illuminati agenda. You'd all be fucked already. Now, all of these little problems are, as I said, stuff we can deal with right now. You just have to turn off the screen, stop ordering pizzas and Coke, and get your arse into gear to change your daily habits. And not all at once. Don't make a mountain out of it. Just one thing at a time. If you do watch the telly, throw the fucker away. When I do energy audits in permaculture courses, we state that a telly only consumes 4% of the household energy budget. However, look at it globally. If you spend 20 hours a week in front of the screen, that's quite a lot of energy. It's enough, in fact, to become halfway self-sufficient. You could stop buying GMO food right now and start growing your own and start eating it in 6 months' time. When you do grow a few vegetables, setting up a parallel water harvesting system becomes a feasible project because the cost of the installation is spread out not only over drinking and washing, but also over food production. This is another way of joining up the dots, and it's creative and not at all consuming. You see, you could then go on to put in a filter into your water harvesting system and then drink filtered rainwater, and then you would stop drinking fluoride. Now, if you apply yourself fully, it might take you 5 years just to get that far. If you have a go at growing your own seeds, you will be ensuring the development of new genetics that will resist climate change and chemtrails. And if there was ever a time to sow the pips and stones from fruits to create new genetics, it's now. 10 years later, you may find that the apples your tree gives out are a load of shit, but you may well sow the genetic combination that feeds the next generation in your bioregion through grafted clones of drought-resistant, flood-resistant cultivars. Drought-resistant trees, that's an interesting concept. Now, if you plant bee-friendly plants and create a non-toxic island in amongst all this mess, you will also be helping to save the bees and our future as a free species on the planet. You could then buy a flow hive and do some very easy beekeeping. Again, Google that, flow hive. There really are some great ideas bubbling up to the surface right now, and this time invented by people on the ground like you and me. There is a lot of work to be done, and believe me, we are running as late as the White Rabbit, but we could get the monster out of the house without burning the house down first. Now, when we get onto the big subjects like HAARP, and chemtrails, and all the other big tools of the hidden hand, we start walking on very dodgy ground. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, who knows? You definitely don't. The only thing I am sure of is that harping on about it, sorry that was too easy, isn't going to stop it. No amount of petitions or political revolutions will shut down a secret weapon of that magnitude. Believe me, if HAARP is what we are led to believe it is, they won't be letting go of it anytime soon. Climate change, contrary to what David Icke says, is very real. It is quite logical and not all to do with greenhouse gases, although that is a major contributing factor. Vegetation, especially trees, absorb the overall climate energy. They absorb the sun, they absorb greenhouse gases, they slow down the rain, they absorb the wind, they keep things cool, they build soil, they stop runoff and erosion and flash flooding, etc. The riotous climatic conditions that we are experiencing are largely due to the sudden lack of trees and hedges, too much concrete and too much compacted soil through bad agricultural practices. Just look at the desert, freezing cold at night, boiling hot in the day, and no bloody water to be found anywhere except occasional torrential rainfalls that then run off to the sea or evaporate within a few hours. All the extremes of climate all the time because there is nothing there to absorb the overall climate energy. I'm quite positive that if we replanted enough trees, the effects of tools like HAARP would become laughable. Now, the problem is that by focusing on all of these fantastic and rather intricate reasons why we are already beaten and creating ever more complex webs of self-deceit to justify our continued inaction, it's all going to make all of this stuff more real and more powerful. Remember, it's about bums on seats, so spreading the word about the Anunnaki preparing an interdimensional porthole under Walmart so that they can march their dragon armies through and eat us all probably isn't the best thing to be imagining, is it? Permaculture gets you into